Well, thank you for that warm welcome, and thank you, Mark, and it's wonderful to be working with you again. As Mark stated, I'm the acting Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, with an emphasis on acting, because my boss, Robert O'Brien, was last week named National Security Advisor. And so suddenly I'm acting, and I'm acting without a script. But I'm glad to be among friends and like-minded people here looking at this very serious issue of hostage affairs. I was preparing Robert for this event and provided him what he needs. He needs very little. So I'm using the very little that he was to have given you here and hope that it suffices. If I could begin by introducing the whole idea of what is this Special Presidential Envoy. And I do have some notes I'd like to share with you about that, because I was, as Mark said, at the U.S. mission to the UN for 26 years, and then went off in retirement to become a professor of diplomacy. So I took to research, and as soon as I discovered the Special Presidential Envoy, I said, I need to know more. Why is there the word presidential in this title when most envoys do not have that? And this is what I discovered. An envoy is a diplomatic agent brought in to energize the system, to catalyze all available resources for meeting our interests while securing our values. So an envoy is meant to be an adjunct to the diplomatic corps to energize the system that needs it. A special envoy is created in response to current urgent needs that go beyond the ongoing routine management of our national interests abroad. Such diplomats address immediate concerns with the view to establish a new normal, that is, to prevent relapse into uncivil behaviors that they're addressing. So there is an envoy, and then there is a special envoy. Now, presidential. Okay, what does that mean? Presidential envoy could be read as personal envoy to the president. Why? Because through this agent, the president risks his personal political capital openly and without cover. He edicts an all-of-government effort on his watch over a critical issue threatening America's interests. So I'll repeat, his personal political capital is on the line. An all-of-government effort over a critical issue facing America's interests. So let me put this in context. Most envoys, as distinct from ambassadors, are created by the Secretary of State. However, special presidential envoys are exceedingly rare in American history. They are created by the Chief Executive in conjunction with the Secretary of State through an executive order. Now, while today there are nearly 50 envoys created by the Secretary of State, and not all of them are encumbered currently, about 50 envoys. The president has, in contrast, special political envoys are very rare, and there are currently only 2. So 50 envoys, 2 presidential envoys. The other presidential envoy currently deals with ISIL. Since the Theodore Roosevelt administration, there have been about a dozen such presidential envoys, and this includes the likes of Colonel Edward House, who famously brokered the peace treaty concluding World War I. I discovered it also includes George Marshall, post-World War II, as the architect of the Marshall Plan and so much else that reconstructed the world. So as regards the hostage affairs part of this very long title, the president has a strict no concessions policy, no ransom payments, no human exchanges. This takes hostages off the table, yet they remain squarely on his desk, where the buck stops here and the work starts there. And if I could point out the president's desk, you've all seen photos of his desk. In the front of the desk is an emblem of an American eagle. The desk was a gift to President Harrison by Queen Victoria, fashioned from the timbers of a ship that had been used in commerce called the Resolute. The Resolute was a British ship. She fashioned this beautiful desk from the timbers of this famous ship and made a gift of state to us of that. During the FDR administration, he had installed the front panel of the desk, the door that opens and closes. You may recall children of the presidents playing hide and seek through that door. On that door in the front of the panel is an eagle, the American eagle. This is the eagle that was our official symbol before the Truman administration. And I wish I had a visual here, but you can imagine the eagle's head is facing the talons that hold the arrows in that era. And the other talon holding the olive branch is not so focused. Well, after World War II, President Truman decided we were going to turn the head of the eagle to the talon facing the laurel so that we look for peace and cooperation after this devastating World War II. So that's called the Truman Eagle. But the desk still has the Resolute Eagle on it. So we took that Resolute Eagle, which shows that in the first instance, particularly in the matter of hostage recovery or those detained wrongfully, in the first instance, our country will look to the arrows. We will take action as necessary. We will engage what we can to bring those people home. And of course, we will always work through negotiation and diplomatic means. So we are resolute, as is the desk, in drawing everyone's attention, the government-wide attention, all of government effort in the name of the president, who offers himself no political cover. We are resolute toward recovery of Americans wrongfully detained or held hostage overseas, resolute to provide prevention against this heinous practice, and resolute to reaffirm and promote global norms of behavior that call out this pernicious behavior. So this work can offer a lot of lessons learned for a world where one or two bad actors can hold America's interests hostage. To wit, cyber matters, germ warfare, identity theft. You see, this is a form of what we call asymmetric power. One small actor can turn the tide. One airplane into the towers in New York City can change our lives. This asymmetric power is unfairly and recklessly abused by those who take hostages or hold people wrongfully. They hold one person in the direst of circumstances, and it can drive our national agenda, and it can destroy families and cause upheaval to their society. So it's a very expensive outcome at a very, very low cost of this exercise of asymmetric power. And I have to say that the lessons that we learn or trying to learn in dealing with asymmetric power as exercised by captors, these lessons may very well serve us very soon in our national interests, promoting American national security, because other forms of asymmetric behavior are on the horizon. As I mentioned, matters involving cyber warfare perhaps, or other forms where a malign actor in the world can somehow use the fulcrum and lever to their advantage in an asymmetric fashion. So we have much to learn in our daily exercise of our mandate in hostage affairs, not only for the recovery and for the prevention, but also in the service of our national security and interests going forward. Because these are the types of lessons I think might end up threatening us more than we realize at this point. So the suffering and the anxiety and the work that we all endure in this enterprise is something that I know the President is watching closely, one that he supports greatly. We're very, very grateful that Robert O'Brien is where he is. He's taken his vast knowledge and expertise in this area to him to magnify it and to keep it high on the horizon. And this issue is nothing that he needs to sell or promote in the White House. If anything, the President has been pulling on this. He's not been a hard sell whatsoever on the matters of hostage affairs. And it does indeed constitute one of our nation's highest foreign policy priorities. So with that, I would like to say that Robert sends his warm greetings to all of us. He called me today. He direly wished that he could have spoken with you today. Asked me to convey a few quick points, which I will do since I'm acting and I have a script a couple of scripts from him, I'd say, that the 40 years of hostage-taking industry as exercised by Iran is unforgivable, and in fact, it is an industry. It's not a matter of one-off. We have hostage cases in other environments where we know we're dealing with one or two bad actors, where the country involved is indeed just as upset as we. No, this is a cottage and now a growth and now a major industry in Iran's arsenal of international affairs. We have innocent Americans involved. This is wrongful in every single way whatsoever, and there is absolutely no moral equivalent between those held there and others who might be held here, other Iranian interests who are brought to justice for charges and crimes and duly prosecuted. There's absolutely no equivalence involved when there's a suggestion of some type of opportunity hinting at something like that. There is absolutely no equivalence involved with our innocent Americans. We have the humanitarian argument that we exercise frequently and unfortunately often. Many of our American hostage or wrongfully detained are elderly, ill, desperately need assistance. We make this known that this brings another level of intensity to our need to resolve the conflict and to bring the American home. As you recall, in North Korea, the warm beer incident, the young man returned home only to die shortly thereafter. That seared greatly into America's conscience. The president just hosted the family recently again for a family meal in the White House. This is not something that gets forgotten. It was atrocious to have been taken under any circumstance, but the cost to the captors is exceedingly high when they allow somebody to perish either there or soon thereafter due to their hand. So we are in my Office of Hostage Affairs taking a look at recovery, of course, first and foremost, along with the Hostage Recovery Fusion Cell and the Hostage Response Group based on the National Security Council. But we take our name seriously. Hostage Affairs incorporates the recovery, but it also has to contemplate other things that will help us anticipate areas which could benefit through prevention, for instance, and discussion of this sort. More awareness raising internationally, that we reaffirm the norms against hostage taking, and we expect them to be elaborated in international and intergovernmental settings going forward. Well, this morning I had the opportunity to sit in the General Assembly during the presentation by Iran, during their intervention in the General Assembly general debate. And we very carefully planned our attendance this morning. Having served in the mission many years, I can attest that often we would either not sit at the desk whatsoever or maybe send a very junior note taker to an intervention of this sort. And this year we determined, no, let us leave the desk empty except for the face of our hostage negotiator. So I sat there and represented families in America to unambiguously notify the Iranians that we are watching, we are dutiful on this topic. I know they were probably, the cameras zoom in on the U.S. desk whenever something critical is said, and I expect it happened frequently today, that they would then say, who is that? And the word hostage becomes part of the narrative right away. So I am grateful to have had the opportunity and the support of the Secretary and the National Security Council and others that this message could be made. And if you realize that the title that we portray as the Presidential Envoy is yet another opportunity for Iran to know that we have repeatedly offered our time, attention to meet with them, not just the hostage matters, but on several other critical matters, of course, in our relationship and in the world, and we are not obliged with the reply. So in other terms, the presence there was yet a reminder that we are present, available, and wish to see efforts of good faith on their part come forward. Another thing that comes to mind while being back at the UN, and this may come as news to some of you, that in 1979, the UN concluded an international convention against hostage taking. So I, again, put on my professorial hat and dug through the archives, and indeed it came into force in 1983. And you, and probably Iran too, would be surprised to recall that Iran decided to ratify this international convention against the hostage taking at the UN. They did so in 2006. So it had already been nearly 30 years, and something happened in 2006 where they came forward and decided to ratify the convention, and which I think bears publicity in every instance. And they even went so far as to include a voluntary declaration to the, here it is, to their ratification. They didn't need to do this, and here's what it says. The government of the Islamic Republic of Iran declares its categorical condemnation of each and every act of terrorism, including taking innocent civilians as hostages, which violates human rights and fundamental freedom of humankind, undermines the stability and security of human communities, and hinders countries from development and progress. So that's not that long ago, 13 years. So our office, as I say, looks to its title of Hostage Affairs to try to broaden our reach, make this practice more and more unacceptable, and to look to fora such as the UN. The UN is a remarkable invention. It's got its strengths and weaknesses, and whatever one says, it has an undeniable, consistent strength, and it's obvious. It's the power to convene. It convenes the world, especially this week. Numerous heads of state. I first arrived at the UN in 1989, and 5 or 6 heads of state would show up. It is routine that 130, maybe 140 heads of state are here, or their senior foreign ministers to flush up the other 50 or so countries. So this is a major power to convene, and it's even gone so far in the last 15 years that it will convene like-minded groups to hold events here during this week, which is what's happening here today. All across town, hundreds of side events, some huge and some less ambitious, but nonetheless, the power to convene is a very strong thing. And so our office is going to explore some of the properties of this power and come up to New York and identify kindred spirits who may be waiting for us to talk to them, to identify what this place could afford as a platform for understanding, but furthermore, as a platform to develop other lines of effort, not on behalf of only one country, but as we recruit other countries through this platform, creating other lines of effort in conjunction with other countries to make it more and more obvious that the captors need to pay attention. The naming and shaming from one country to another goes just so far, but we can magnify that and make our efforts all the more powerful through this type of crowdsourcing. So we will be exploring, in addition to our regular workload, how to leverage the opportunities presented by a week such as this, and also to seek to reaffirm the International Convention this year in a formalized way, which can afford some publicity to efforts such as yours, and certainly for those families and others so affected by this pernicious behavior. So I'm very grateful for your attention. Thank you very much. I look forward to working with you.